discourse is saturated with kinetics. The U.S. State Department clears a $45 million sale of Hellfire missiles to Denmark. Reports circulate that Russia appeared to use a nuclear-capable missile in Ukraine. The media cycle fixates on launch signatures and explosive yields. This is a deliberate misdirection. The kinetic cost is too high, the escalation path too predictable. It is a symmetric playbook for solvent nations, a luxury a failing state cannot afford. The real vector is silent. It has no launch signature and generates no heat. Analysts at RUSI and CSEs have mapped the critical vulnerability, the global network of subsea fiber optic cables. Trillions of dollars in financial transactions, military commands, and economic data flow through these unprotected conduits. For a state facing a systemic solvency crisis, this is the ultimate asymmetric leverage. The objective is not destruction, it is paralysis. The primary strike is severing these data arteries. The secondary strike targets the orbital layer, satellite blinding. Dazzling lasers or directed energy weapons render observation and communication satellites inert. It doesn't require destroying them, merely denying access. The goal is to create a total information blackout. This protocol triggers the emergence of the blind Leviathan, a superpower stripped of its senses. Its financial markets cannot clear transactions. Its carrier groups cannot receive targeting data. Its command authority cannot verify its own status. It is a giant, powerful but inert, thrashing in darkness. And a state in that condition, facing total systemic collapse, is forced to its final protocol, launch on warning, based on ghosts and assumptions. This is the mathematical certainty of the silent vector. A state does not wage a war it cannot afford. When it does, it is no longer a war. It is a solvency crisis. The kinetic cost of a protracted conflict drains national liquidity. According to analysis from CSIS, the war in Ukraine has become a profound domestic liability for Russia, creating a feedback loop of military exhaustion and internal economic pressure. This is the trigger condition. Systemic weakness is a strategic accelerant. It forces a state to abandon the symmetric rules of conventional engagement because it can no longer afford the price of admission. The collapse of Venezuela serves as the modern blueprint for this protocol, a cautionary tale where total economic failure hollowed out the state's capacity to function conventionally. Insolvency compels a pivot to asymmetry. When a state cannot win on the established battlefield, it changes the battlefield itself. The objective shifts from military victory to adversary paralysis. In Sudan's civil war, investigators report both sides have turned to genocidal tactics. This is not arbitrary cruelty. It is a low-cost, high-leverage strategy to liquidate opposition when conventional military power is exhausted. This logic scales to the highest level of leverage. Reports indicate Russia appeared to use a nuclear-capable missile in Ukraine. This is not a battlefield decision. It is a balance sheet calculation. When facing systemic collapse, a state is forced to leverage its final, non-negotiable asset. The threat is not the missile. The threat is the mathematical certainty that an insolvent power will default to its ultimate asymmetric option to avoid liquidation. It is a predictable protocol. The central protocol of modern conflict is economic, not kinetic. According to analysis from the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, the cost exchange is the primary vector of attack. A main battle tank represents a $5 million liability. The asset designed to destroy it is a $500 first-person view drone. This is not a balanced equation. It is a solvency crisis executed on the battlefield. This radical cost inversion creates a condition known as the democratization of violence. The financial barrier to entry for projecting lethal force has collapsed. A conventional military, built on expensive platforms like tanks and high-cost munitions, such as Hellfire missiles valued at over $450,000 per unit, is structured for symmetric warfare. It is fiscally unprepared for an adversary that can achieve the same kinetic outcome at a 10,000 to 1 cost disadvantage. This forces a strategic pivot. A state being economically bled by thousands of low-cost, asymmetric attacks cannot sustain a conventional defense. It is a mathematical certainty. The response protocol is to abandon the symmetric rulebook and escalate to a domain where the cost-exchange ratio is irrelevant. This is the pathway from military exhaustion, seen in protracted conflicts from Ukraine to Sudan, directly to the deployment of ultimate leverage. It is a predictable escalation triggered by insolvency. The zones of conflict are not random. They are laboratories. The Systemic Economic Collapse Protocol, field-tested in Venezuela, established the baseline. Total state insolvency is the trigger for abandoning conventional rules. This is not a political failure. It is a calculated feature of modern conflict. The current gray zones, such as Sudan, are the next stage proving grounds. There, military exhaustion has predictably degraded into genocidal tactics on both sides. This is not a tragedy. It is a live fire test of asymmetric population, control and resource liquidation when kinetic costs become unsustainable. These proxy laboratories are where escalation doctrines are refined. The reported use of a nuclear-capable missile in Ukraine is the protocol graduating from a regional test to a strategic deployment against a primary target. It is the mathematical certainty of a cornered state leveraging its final asset. According to Russell, this pattern of asymmetric escalation is a predictable response to a solvency crisis. The West's reaction, transferring conventional assets like Hellfire missiles, is a fundamentally flawed attempt to apply old paradigms to a new asymmetric battlefield. They are preparing for a fight that is already over. The real war is being beta-tested in these designated zones of collapse. The launch-on-warning doctrine is not a strategy. It is a protocol dictated by solvency. As detailed in CSS wargaming scenarios, the protocol exists because no nuclear state can absorb the kinetic cost of a full-scale first strike and guarantee a retaliatory response. It is a pre-calculated decision to launch nuclear assets the moment early warning systems confirm an inbound enemy attack, before the incoming warheads can impact and destroy launch capability. This protocol, however, contains a systemic vulnerability. The new vector of asymmetric warfare is not kinetic, it is digital. We are now in the fog of digital war. An adversary does not need to fire a missile to trigger a launch. They only need to convince their target that a missile has been fired. A targeted cyber attack can blind satellite and radar infrastructure, creating a complete information blackout. For the commander in the bunker, the screen goes dark. There are two possibilities: a technical malfunction or a coordinated stealth attack designed to mask an imminent decapitation strike. The protocol does not allow for guesswork. This is where systemic weakness becomes the primary accelerant. A state facing military exhaustion, like Russia in its protracted conflict, operates from a position of strategic insolvency. Reports that Russia appeared to use a nuclear-capable missile in Ukraine already signal an embrace of asymmetric escalation. That state cannot afford to be wrong. It cannot risk waiting for secondary confirmation that may never come. In the absence of data, the launch protocol defaults to the worst-case scenario. Fear forces the decision. The fear of total annihilation by waiting outweighs the fear of initiating a launch based on a digital ghost. The blind commander is forced to launch. This is the mathematical certainty of the fog of digital war. When the system is insolvent, a manufactured crisis becomes kinetically identical to a real one. Systemic weakness is not a localized failure. It is a strategic liability. The economic collapse of Venezuela provides the blueprint. Military exhaustion in protracted conflicts, a vector now active in both Sudan and Russia, acts as the primary accelerant. As reports indicate, Russia has already signaled its willingness to escalate by appearing to use a nuclear-capable missile in Ukraine. When a state faces a terminal solvency crisis, it does not negotiate. It abandons conventional rules. This is a predictable protocol. To avoid total collapse, the insolvent state must demonstrate asymmetric leverage. A symmetric, kinetic war is a luxury it can no longer afford. The alternative is the calibration shot, a strategic, attribution impossible strike designed to test an adversary's response threshold. It is the modern equivalent of a warning shot, but aimed at economic choke points, not military assets. The objective is not destruction, but the demonstration of capability, inflicting maximum financial pain with perfect deniability. Therefore, the forecast approaches mathematical certainty. Within the next 12 months, expect a catastrophic failure of a Tier 1 transatlantic data artery. The event will be attributed to a deep-sea seismic event or a commercial vessel anchor drag. The kinetic cost will be zero. The liquidity and data flow cost will be in the trillions. This will not be an accident. It will be a message, a calibration for the next phase of conflict.